The Royal Rumble was quite a roller coaster, so I'm grading all the decisions next. Now that the Royal Rumble is in the books, let's go back and grade all the surprises, how I did in my booking videos, and then grade that against WWE for their booking decisions. So let's start with the surprise entrance from the Women's Royal Rumble, and at number 6 was Lola Vice. She was the first NXT entrant of the night in her Royal Rumble debut, and based on her heavy usage between both NXT and AAA, it was no surprise and a good call to get her into this match. She didn't last long and was the first woman eliminated in the match, but she showed off her big moveset of kicks. So we have to give her inclusion an A-, which takes us to number 10 and Sol Ruca, because if anyone from NXT was going to be in this match, you probably had to put Sol at the top of the list, following her inclusion on Saturday night's main event for Cena's final match. And they certainly treated her like a true future star, lasting nearly 51 minutes and finishing in 3rd place, so this is a slam dunk of an A. Number 24 was Jacy Jayne, and she was another surefire inclusion here, as this marks the 3rd time in 4 years that the women's NXT champion has appeared in the Rumble. And in a year in which she twice won that title and was also a double champion for just over a month with the TNA Knockouts Championship, no one deserved a spot in the Rumble more than Jacy, so this also gets an A. Kalani Jordan entered at number 27, and she is the 4th straight and the last NXT surprise entrant, and she too had a run with the TNA Knockouts Championship and even decided to be on Team TNA at Showdown, so perhaps WWE should have held that against her for this a bit longer. We'll surely see her on the main roster before too much longer, so we can't complain here either, but she also didn't do a whole lot in the match, and with a very favorable spot at number 27, you almost have to wonder if she was on standby duty to see if either Bianca or AJ would be there instead. So for that, we have to give her a B. At number 29 was Brie Bella, and well, it's about time that Brie joined Nikki to give us some twin magic so they can finally have a run at trying to win the tag team titles. So while she didn't quite last 7 minutes, she and Nikki teamed up to eliminate Lyra and Bayley, so that's a pretty good start. And of any legend that could potentially return, this was the right one to bring back, so yes, she gets an A. And at number 30, Tiffany Stratton, it was finally Tiffy time, as Tiffy got the coveted number 30 spot, and that followed up her number 29 spot from 2 years ago when she was still on the NXT roster, and she got 4th place there, so she improved to 2nd place here, and it was her first appearance since losing the WWE Women's Championship to Jade Cargill on November 1st at Saturday night's main event. So while Tiffy's return was not the biggest surprise ever, it was one we definitely wanted and needed to see, so we have to give her an A. So let's go to the men's Royal Rumble surprises, and I'm not going to count Obafemi here since I suppose a month's worth of vignettes made it too obvious that he was going to be in the match, so they just decided to give it away. And I'm also not sure why they just give away Brock Lesnar's return, because while everyone anticipated that he'd be there, AJ Lee was thought to be returning as well, and then she didn't, so you just never really know until the music hits, so WWE definitely dropped the ball there just to throw Pat McAfee a bone. But of the entrants we got, number 5 was Rusev. He hadn't been on TV since losing in the Last Time Is Now tournament on November 28th, but it seems like he should have just declined the invitation to be in this match, as he lasted a mere 32 seconds before easily falling prey to Obafemi. He also didn't appear on Raw the following Monday, so I'm not sure what we're even doing here. Theoretically, there is nothing wrong with this choice, as he probably should be in the top 30 choices for the men, but this is an absolute waste of a space based on how it went down for him, as there were plenty of others that could have filled this particular role and still given Rusev a much more proper return later, so we have to give this a D. At number 9 was Mr. Iguana, and sure, Mr. Iguana has received a lot of love since WWE audiences were introduced to him at Worlds Collide, and it's probably safe to call him the breakout star of the AAA group. And I don't really have any problem with including him here, as he certainly did his shtick with La Yesca in his mere 2 minutes in the ring. We should have some moments of levity in the Royal Rumble, and he succeeded, so I'll give this a respectable B-. At number 13 was the original El Grande Americano. So there was an imposter El Grande Americano this whole time? Well, I never would have known had two of them not shown up at exactly the same time, but maybe it's the original that's the imposter, because Rayo and Bravo certainly wouldn't be following around a faker, right? Anyways, whoever is under this mask was believed to be nearing a return, and he certainly took his time to look as buff as ever, and that is amazing considering it was a serious rotator cuff injury that was keeping him out of action. And the Spider-Man point was great, and the only sad part here was that neither Americano lasted very long, but this gets an A-. At number 14 is Royce Keys, and upon dropping the AEW World Trios Championships, reports immediately came out that Powerhouse Hobbs was leaving AEW and signing with WWE. And then we'd learned that he'd be going by the name Royce Keys in WWE, but we didn't know exactly when and where he would debut. And it sure turned out to be at the Royal Rumble, where he made a pretty good first impression by eliminating Damian Priest in his nearly 10 minutes in the match before being eliminated by another very large man in Bronson Reed. I definitely did not love that they put his former name on the big screen first before switching it to his new moniker, which also immediately tells me that you probably should not have debuted him in this match. So while we don't know just where he'll show up next, I'd have preferred he just made his surprise appearance there instead, so he is getting a D. At number 18 is La Parka, and WWE audience first got to see him at TripleMania in the Copa Bardal, and going into the Rumble, he had fought with or against WWE or NXT superstars 7 times. So it's not like he was a complete unknown, but while dipping into the AAA well once was fine, going back to it a second time was simply overkill. And that is especially so when you consider that there were no NXT or TNA stars that got to appear. He didn't quite make it to 4.5 minutes, and he also had 0 eliminations, so what were we even doing here? This one is an easy F. LA Knight returned at number 21, and we know Knight wasn't really injured, but man, did he deserve a break after leading SmackDown in televised main roster matches in 2023 and 2024, and all of WWE in televised main roster matches in 2025 by 8 with 48. So it was only a matter of time before he returned, and there was no better time than the Royal Rumble. But even with 3 eliminations, his role in the match was a little bit less than what we would have hoped, but his return still clearly gets an A. I don't know how number 21 was the last surprise entrant in a Royal Rumble, but that was it. So let's compare and contrast and then grade my booking decisions against the actual booking decisions in the Rumble. So we'll start with the winners, and I again made the same mistake for the Women's Royal Rumble that I made last year when I selected Becky Lynch to win. And then I went and doubled down and selected Bianca Belair to make her surprise return and then to win the whole thing. Obviously, she did not do that, and Liv Morgan won instead, and I have no complaints, as she certainly deserves it, and had I known that Bianca wouldn't have been available, I would have followed the odds and just picked Liv as well. But at least there was no Jey Uso swerve for the Men's Rumble, as WWE made the safe and correct choice to have Roman Reigns win the Rumble. Cody Rhodes would have been a terrible choice to win his 3rd straight Royal Rumble, and Braun Breaker just didn't feel right after losing to Punk on the first Raw of the new year, and having Gunther win would have really been a tough pill to swallow considering what he'd done earlier in the night. So Reigns was simply the only man that made perfect sense. So my 2 picks get an I for incomplete, since I couldn't have known about Bianca, and I'll give WWE an A for getting this correct with those talents that were available. Next, let's break this down to the hits and misses of the 30 people in each Rumble. Now for the women, I got 24 out of 30 last year, and I improved to 27 out of 30 this year. I am pretty pumped about that, considering that this video came out 3 whole weeks before the Rumble. So let's break this down by the numbers, and first for the current active main roster superstars, I predicted 23, and there were actually 24. The only person I missed here was Ivy Now, but I'm glad she got to participate because that meant that only Nikki Cross and Alba Fire weren't included in the match, and Alba certainly did her best to keep Chelsea alive. Next for the current injured superstars, which here means anyone that was out for more than a month with either a real or a storyline injury, and I predicted 2 of them to return, but there was just one, as Tiffany Stratton returned, but Bianca Belair did not. Now for the other current returnees who have been away for at least 1 month but are definitely not injured, I projected 1 with AJ Lee, but she surprisingly did not return, so there were 0. I also projected 1 legend return, and sure enough, Brie Bella returned as I had thought, and while I would have loved to have seen a few others, but for the sake of my picks, I'm pretty happy that I nailed this one. I also correctly said that we would not have any TNA or AAA or celebrities or WWE debuts. So that leaves the NXT roster, and I picked 3, but there were 4, but not the exact 3 that I picked. So I must be way off about Blake Monroe, as she was also my early choice for Rookie of the Year for 2026. And she didn't appear here at all, and instead both Lola Vice and Kalani Jordan appeared in the Rumble. And I have to admit, you can't really go wrong with either of those picks. I'm going to give myself a B+ here. I guess I was a bit over my skis about Bianca Belair, but AJ Lee is really quite puzzling. I'll give WWE an A- here because there were reports that indicated that AJ was initially supposed to be booked for this match. But of course, as things go, they fell apart. Had she been there, they'd get an A, but she's just too big of a star to have been left out. Now for the men, I was 23 out of 30 last year, and I really only got 22 out of 30 this year, though I think you could give me 23 if you were generous, and I'll briefly discuss that in a bit. Now first for the current active superstars, I picked 24 to be in the Rumble, and there were 23. Of course, I didn't just miss 1 name, however. Since that video came out on the 16th, AJ Styles didn't even enter into his retirement match stipulation until the 19th, so I obviously included him to be in this match. I also certainly didn't see Finn Balor getting left out at that point either, and we have seen plenty of mid-card champions be involved, so I was really surprised that Carmelo Hayes was left out. I also couldn't know that Jimmy Uso was apparently just going to get a couple weeks off to tend to family matters. Now, Aleister Black suffered a minor injury during his ambulance match, but his brief absence was planned, and he even made it to Saudi Arabia, but they just decided to keep him out. Now on the flip side, I probably should have included Matt Cardona since he had just returned. Then Dragon Lee certainly deserved a spot after the year that he just had. I am a little surprised though that The Miz got to appear, as he just keeps losing matches, but he just keeps getting rolled on out there into the ring. And he's now just 1 Rumble behind Kane's record of 18. And then there's the asterisk. I announced El Grande Americano in my video, but I had him get attacked by Chad Gable so that he didn't actually participate. And well, I guess they both got to participate here, so this one has to go down as a miss. Then for the current injured superstars, I picked 3, but only 2 made it, including the original El Grande Americano, as well as the storyline injured LA Knight, but Dirty Dom, I guess he was just not quite ready to go. Now for the current returnees, I picked Brock Lesnar, but Rusev also counts in this group, so there were 2. While I was right that there were no TNA superstars, I was absolutely stunned that there were 2 AAA wrestlers when I picked none. I'm also pretty shocked that my sole NXT pick of Joe Hendry didn't come through, though he did win that NXT title on Tuesday night. But I lost that one since there were no NXT superstars at all, since I'm going to count Obafemi as being on the main roster due to all of those vignettes that we had to suffer through. I also picked 1 legend, which was Chris Jericho, who disappointed just about everybody by not making his big return, so there were none. But there was an AEW star who made his WWE debut in Royce Keys, and I obviously didn't pick him since his last AEW match aired the day after I made this video, so I picked 0 while there ended up being 1. So I do have some good reasons for missing a few of these men, and the men's Royal Rumble is just generally a little bit harder to pick than the women's, but I still got worse from last year, so I'm giving myself a D+. As for WWE, their hands were tied with AJ Styles, and obviously I'm fine with including both El Grande Americanos instead of just one, but I disagree with a lot of these decisions, most of which we talked about in part 1 earlier, so I won't repeat them here. But they still should have found a way to include Balor, Jimmy Uso, and Hayes if it was at all possible, so I'm giving WWE a D. Now for all things combined, the Women's Royal Rumble, just in its flow, I think it was a pretty good match, so I'm gonna give that a B+. But the Men's Rumble was pretty weak this year, and I know a lot of people are hating it, so I'm gonna give this a D+. So it was quite a mixed bag for me and for the WWE with this Rumble, but I guess that makes sense considering the reception to it, especially that Men's Rumble. But for my full breakdown of the Rumble and this week's Raw, be sure to go right on over here to check out the last 2 Stop the 10 Count videos. So until next time, I am the SportsZu, and this has been a podcast that needs a new name.